Hello, I'm Mantastic and Fantastic, and today I'm going to be talking about version 18.5.2 update that has just gone live in North America. So this update will give us numerous buffs to existing cards, new latent skill to Madras, buffs to Pad Pass, a new UI filter sorting system, as well as other wondrous things that I will be talking about in this upcoming video. If you are curious as to what the official announcement had, you can click the following link to go to the Pad Gung Ho North American page. But buffs to existing cards is always an exciting time because it grants cards that may have fallen out of favor new viability. It may not necessarily make them the best card out there, but it makes them possibly more usable, and if they've been sitting around in your box, they might be granting yourself access to new team compositions that could have been impossible beforehand. And that is the main reason why I would never get rid of a single copy of a single card, because when that occurs, you won't have a chance to utilize them if they receive a buff in the future. Of course, not every card will receive a buff, let alone a meaningful buff, but why take that chance? Because it's much harder to acquire a card again as opposed to having it sitting in your box. Either way, let us take a look at all the newly buffed cards. So for Piamon, their leader skill is a color cross. They need to match light and dark crosses, which can be cumbersome, and one major drawback was having the inability to overcome combo shields. But thankfully, with Paimon's upgraded leader skill, they add +1 combo per leader for every cross of light or dark. That means you can have on a 6x5 board potentially +2, +2, +2 for a total of +6 combos. It makes it so you're able to actually hit combo shield thresholds. It just makes it so you actually deal more damage or heal a bit more. Either way, bonus combos is never going to be a bad thing, and their awakenings have been changed to give an extra skill boost and a brand new 7 combo. That is definitely a meaningful awakening change because Piamon just gained 2 times more personal damage. And to be fair, damage was never necessarily an issue for Piamon, but it's going to help ensure that like single or double crosses might be able to sweep a few more floors compared to beforehand. For DKali, I feel like she is one of the big winners of this buff series because she now has up to 6 skill boosts with Super Awakenings. That is quite rare. It's hard to find 6 skill boosts on a given card, and DKali also has strong personal damage with 777 combo. She has a useful board changer. It doesn't have any extra zest, but it's a reasonably low cooldown and it serves its purpose. And she also has gained balance typing in addition to her god typing. That balance typing gives her more latent Tamadra options, but it more so means that she can be used on a wider variety of teams. So your Valentine's Ideal or say New Year's Reach, if you're using them, want to use balance type cards, and they excluded gods as well. So that means DKali now can be utilized across a wider variety. It's not just like your Dire and A10/Dire plus Minerva teams. Now it could be Valentine's Ideal. Like, you have flexibility, and with all these skill boosts, it helps ensure that a card could transform if that's actually a requirement. So I'm actually looking forward to utilizing my DKali across more rainbow teams. For Ameno in this form here, they gain more health, which is always nice, but their active skill has been reduced from a 10 to a 7 turn cooldown. I like this cooldown reduction because it's a tricolor board changer with hearts on a 7 turn cooldown. That's incredibly fast, but it also gives you 3 turns of 35% damage reduction. And that damage reduction can be meaningful because it could help you survive larger preemptives, higher gravities, or the most notable Mine plus Kuro combo in Altarena 4 if you're playing with someone like Yomi Norza, who have lower effective health without their shields, which does get erased by Mine upon her death animation. So this 3 turns of 35% damage reduction will at least last through that death animation, which in turn means you can survive that Kuro preemptive. It's just it's one relatively niche situation, but it's worth mentioning if you are using Yomi Norza and you want to use Ameno. Just makes your life a little easier. As a whole, I like that buff. For Sakuya, she has received a significant overhaul to her active skill. Her active skill is still the same, 20% gravity, which is actually not terrible nowadays considering things like Shura Realm have stupendously high amounts of health. But this active skill will also fully clear bind and awoken binds and grant 2 times RCV and orb movement time for a single turn. That's a large amount of utility squeezed into a single active skill, and she now can function as a reliable bind and awoken bind solution because she has offensive awakening, she has double 7 combo, so she does a little bit of damage, but she also has a super blind resist, which means she fully resists all dark attacks. She can also get cloud or tape resist through her super awakening, so she has quite a bit of value squeezed into those awakenings with a bind and awoken bind clearing active skill. Like, she's no sloth dragon by any means, but it's at least quite a decent solution. Of course, you only get a single attribute color, but at the same time, pretty useful overall, and I feel like I might start utilizing her as my bind awoken bind clearing solution because I don't have a sloth, and this might not be a bad thing to do. For Minerva, her active skill now has 85, not 50% defense break. I think that can be possibly helpful in Training Arena 2, which is a dungeon that has stupendously high defense spawns, but it's nothing that game-changing either. At least it comes with an orb changer alongside of it, so it helps make it a little bit better. But at the same time, I don't feel like Minerva is going to be utilized significantly more because that single skill boost excludes her from all the top fire teams because basically all the top fire teams need to transform, and with one skill boost, you're not helping everyone else out. This active skill and awakenings are not strong enough to keep it up. Next is Parvati, and Parvati actually has a fun typo from Gung Ho. She has the exact same active skill name. She does not use Hellish Inferno. I feel like her active skill at least is that 4-turn cooldown, but the big issue is even though Parvati has large leader skill multipliers, which actually DKali does as well, neither Parvati nor DKali have any damage reduction. They don't have bonus combos, they don't have auto follow attack, they have no extra zest in their leader skill. They just have nice RCV, attack, and health multipliers. But the problem is, at this point in time, current content has numerous gravities. Sometimes gravities that exceed 100% health, which means even if you have 250,000 health, you still die, which is a problem. Raphael in Shura Realm 1 has 150% gravity preemptive, so you need to use an active skill to save yourself, and that's just going to be problematic. Furthermore, Parvati's leader skill I think is a bit chunky, so to speak, because she needs to match numerous matched heart orbs. She wants 7 heart orbs, ideally, which is her damage source. But you also need wood orbs, and she doesn't have personal damage, and combo count may be a little hindered as well, so I feel like there's quite a few things going against her. A while ago, I used Parvati, I think, for a tiny bit of stuff, but nowadays there are much stronger and easier to use leaders. All of the toy dragons have received a very similar buff to what you see here, and I just thought for the sake of redundancy, there's no point in copy-pasting them all, but basically these toy dragons have many recover bind awakenings, which have been buffed, and I'll talk about them a bit later on. But the main issue is there's no real use to these toy dragons. Like, I don't feel like I would be utilizing them on a team necessarily. Like, there are other ways to get that recover bind, like Amaterasu or any of the Cottons have it, for instance, and they make much better subs by comparison. So it's cool that the toy dragons got buffed, but this is not 2015. We don't use toy dragons anymore. Next is Machine Zeus, and Machine Zeus is surprisingly strong now all of a sudden for a specific niche because they have 4 Devil Killers with Super Awakenings, which is 81 times personal damage. There are only a few cards in the game with 4 Devil Killers, and this is the only farmable one, and that makes it a great solution for devil killing needs. If ranking dungeons or farming content comes up, you now have something that can do stupendously high amounts of damage, and they are easy to acquire because they are farmable, and their descent has become significantly easier over time. As a result, if you have a Zeus, or if you have a Machine Zeus, great, you have a Devil Killer. If you don't, maybe you should go pick one up because it's going to be a strong Devil Killing solution, probably better than whatever else you have, and it is farmable. Next is Lynthia, and Lynthia does have 4 skill boosts, which I guess is kind of cool, but the problem is I never would really want to use Lynthia beforehand. I'm not really inclined to use her still, but I guess it's nice that it received a buff. And 9 Garuda, similar idea. Like, their active skill gives you 15% damage reduction and bonus or movement time for 9 turns. These are very small amounts of benefits, and I don't think this active skill is really going to come in handy in any true way, shape, or form. And utilizing them as a leader, it's just not high enough multipliers to really justify it, I feel. More so it's more so pushing itself into a farming role, but again, you have no damage reduction, so no auto-follow attack, no bonus combo, so it's a little harder to use for traditional content, but for farming content, there's no skill boost, it might be hard to get them up, they don't make orbs, it's just, I think, an awkward card overall. And then finally, the red, blue, green starter dragons receive various and meaningless buffs. like, it's, I guess, a little stronger. They may have some awakenings, slightly better leader skills, but the problem is, at this point in time, there is no more early game in pad, because a brand new account can be made. You roll in whatever event is going on, and you can have an entire team of fully leveled cards with max level plus 297 max awakenings right away. And that completely invalidates the need to actually use a starter dragon. The whole point of the starter dragon was to give you something that is a little possibly stronger than other things you had available. Right now, you can roll out maxed out teams, and like, there's no point in using a starter dragon, at least for the early game. And just in general, I feel overall. But the point of the matter is, I guess they got some buffs. Super Player's Choice Godfest, or Player's Choice Godfest, will be returning to North America, along with the voting period occurring now until the 20th. I'm going to be trying to cover that in a subsequent article, just because it deserves a bit more attention. I don't want to get lost in this video. For the 3 new super latents that haven't added into the game, they will all require specific matching patterns to utilize, and they require specific awakenings on the host card to function. Now, there's a bit of a loop around workaround here, because if you inherit something with a weapon assist with that specific awakening, you can technically use that new super latent on that card. But with that being said, as soon as you take that weapon assist off, that latent will no longer function, because that card no longer has the awakening to proc the matching style to trigger this latent awakening. So it's something to keep in mind. They are quite restrictive, but it's worth at least going over all of them. So the unmatchable orb recovery can only be inherited on cards with TPAs, and it will only trigger for 2 separate TPA matches for a color that 2 separate TPA matches of the same attribute for the owning card. So let's use Dark Athena as an example. Dark Athena is dark and water with TPAs. So if she has this latent, you need to match 2 water or 2 dark TPAs to trigger the unmatchable orb recovery effect. And this orb recovery effect will clear those unable to match effects by a single turn per TPA on the owning card. So let's go back to that Dark Athena example, and I believe she has 3 TPAs. Let's just double check. Dark Athena has a total of 4 TPAs. So with 4 TPAs, she can clear up to 4 turns of unable to match orb effects when you match 2 dark or 2 water TPAs. It's not a bad thing to have overall. It does definitely give more merits to TPA-oriented cards, and it also potentially allows you to solve floors without needing to use active skills. But at this point in time, I feel like there's not truly enough unable to match orb effects to justify this usage, and TPA cards, at least the truly strong ones, will often utilize the VDP latent instead, because these TPA cards oftentimes are used on rainbow teams, because mono color teams are blob based. They need rows or VDPs to function. The TPAs are not feasible. So those rainbow cards, these TPA cards often are used on rainbow teams because the matching restrictions are gone. You just need to match combos of different colors, and it's much easier to squeeze in that TPA. So for cards like Raijin and Astalos, you are probably going to want to use the VDP latent on them instead, because that allows those hard-hitting cards to bypass Damage Void completely for rainbow teams, which in turn saves another active skill. I think as a whole, it's a much more reliable system, because when you think about it, if you stuck this on Raijin, you need to match 2 light or 2 dark TPAs, which may or may not always be possible. And like, the whole point of this is to remove those unable to match orb effects right away. And if you have to dance and stall for it, well, what's the point? You might have waited out the duration anyways. So I feel like the big drawback is TPA, or the stronger TPA cards, will want to utilize VDP latent instead, because all these new latents do require 6 slots as well. So you can't have multiple on a single card. The Roulette Orb Recovery will only function for cards that have the Recover Bind Awakening. And then once this is fused to the appropriate monster, this latent will remove a single turn of Spinners or the Roulette per Recover Bind Awakening on the card. So if you have 2 on a given card, they will clear 2 turns of Spinners for every row of hearts you match. So those row of hearts will also trigger the Recover Binds effects as well, but this also will function for this latent. I think this is an interesting concept because it gives us another way to deal with Spinners without an active skill, but at the same time, it's quite a high opportunity cost, because if you think about it, let's say we're going to use this on Amaterasu, who I know has the Recover Mind Awakening. Amaterasu is much better off with Skill Delay Resist and the RCB+. I don't think I would ever put this on her because roulettes are not necessarily that devastating, and generally speaking, many roulettes can be kind of cheesed out because when you think about it, if the roulette is on a 1-second timer, which is the most common one, you can actually tap and hold and like line them all up, so like say a combo is pre-made for you, but at the same time you can also time it. And all you need to do is kind of count backwards for multiples of 6. So let's say it's an 8-second, you have 8 seconds of orb movement time and you need to match light, and there are spinners. You think, well, for 6 seconds, I'm back at light. So now let's go back 2 ahead of light, which means I'll be green and blue. So if I start on blue and I use up my whole timer, I'll end up at light and that orb matches. There are ways to cheese spinners without necessarily using active skills. So I don't feel like this Latent Awakening is going to change much for us overall because we don't have the ability to swap these latents at leisure. Like, these are not going to be the easiest to acquire, and when you think about it, we don't have that option of like customizable cards. You have to either keep destroying old latents and putting new ones on, or make a duplicate of the card and have different latents for different scenarios. It's just a problem, I think, overall, and it cuts down on the possible diversity or interesting uses you could have for these latents because I don't feel like they're outpacing other currently available options, because when you think about it, I could be using a Jammer or Poison Surge, and that's probably going to give me much more value by comparison to this. Finally, we come to the Damage Absorption Piercer. So it's a way to counter damage absorption, which is a terribly designed mechanic overall, and this only works for cards with the Combo Orb Awakening, and these combo orbs will trigger only with 10 to 12 orbs of the same color matched. So the Damage Absorption Piercer works in a similar fashion. When you trigger Combo Orb, you trigger Damage Absorption Piercer, and that allows the owning card to completely bypass and pierce through damage absorption. There are a couple of problems with this Latent overall. Firstly is the way damage is dealt and calculated. So the main issue is damage is dealt probably this way, but left to right from top to bottom. So primary attribute, so all the primary attributes left to right, and then all the sub attributes left to right. So that means your leader will attack first, your subs in order, and then your friend's leader, and then switch to the sub attributes. And the way damage absorption works is any single hit above the threshold will heal the monster based on the damage that was dealt, or would have been dealt. So this damage absorption piercer Latent is kind of like the color, like it's just a little awkward because if you think about it, if you put this on like your leader or your subs, cool, that card will pierce through the damage absorption, but every other hit afterwards will heal the spawn up because damage control doesn't really exist nowadays. So I feel like this can only work if it's given to a card that is or has a sub attribute that's meaningful, and ideally on your friend's leader, because that's going to be the final hit. And if the final hit does enough damage to kill the spawn, it will work. But at the same time, if you have this on your leader, you're completely worthless. It's kind of like leader swap Latent on yourself. You are useless to friends. In this case here, you're useless to yourself. I think it's just a bad design overall. It would have been more helpful if the final hit or like some other way to make this work. Like, it's just awkward, I feel, and it does definitely not justify throwing away 6 Latent slots for something that may not necessarily work. There will also be new buffs to Pad Pass owners. Basically, all Pad Pass owners will now have access to special all-day dungeons and all these Descend series for solo play. Basically, that means various dungeons will be available 24/7 for Pad Pass owners. So now you no longer have to worry about timing certain events to have access to gaining this monster from a Descend, or even playing through like Monday Dungeon on a different day of the week. Point of the matter is, it's just more convenience. It's not necessarily going to break the game. It's just nice to have. And if you are a Pad Pass owner, this is definitely a helpful thing to have. For the various Awoken skill buffs, the Voice Awakening increase the stats by 10% for the owning card. And you might think that is pretty good. Like 10% increase is nice. But the big issue is it's still underwhelming overall because it's only 10% for that given card. And if you think about it, a given team has 6 cards total. So only one card, so 1 out of 6, that's like 16, 17% or so of your team is receiving 10% bonus stats. The amount of stats gained are quite low in the grand scheme of things. A team HP or a team RCV helps the entire team. The percentages are lower for team health. It's only plus 5%, but it's 5% of every single card. That's much better than 10% from a single card. So as a whole, like these skill awakenings, like sure, like they give stats and it's not affected by Awoken Binds, but at the same time, it's not that strong of an awakening overall. By comparison, the Recover Bind is much better, because Recover Bind allows you to match a row of hearts to clear 3 turns of bind statuses. So we know that's normal, that's cool. But it now will also remove 3 turns of binds and is not affected by Awoken Skill Bind. That's a big deal because this awakening now takes effect even through Awoken Binds. And that means something like Fuma in Altarena 2, who will preemptively Awoken Skill Bind you and then bind both your leaders for 3 turns, can be overcome without an active skill. First time it was possible, because beforehand you would have to either use like a big damage reduction or shield or a delay, or bind an Awoken Bind clear to free your leaders and thus gain back access to your leader's skill. With this, you can match that row of hearts. Hopefully you had one already, but you match the row of hearts, both your leaders are unbound. You still don't take away the Awoken Bind clear, but you now have your leader skill, which means you might be able to survive the hit. You could trigger whatever leader skill requirements you are for damage reduction, or you just heal back up, or whatever it may be. The point of the matter is, it's a more flexible awakening that I feel will have more meaning because it's just tied into a card. It's not something you have to you don't have to utilize active skills to make it work. I like solutions without active skills because it gives more flexibility, and Recover Bind is exactly that. And then finally, we have an improved monster box search filter system. So for myself, one of the biggest drawbacks of Pad is I have no idea what's in my box to a certain extent. Like, I'm trying to build a team, I need certain specific awakenings, typings, colors, you name it. I have things I want, and I don't know if any of my given cards have it. I know what cards I have, but I can't memorize everything. So what I've tended to do is I utilize Ilmina.com's fuzzy/advanced search. And basically it allows me to punch in parameters and it will show me all the possible cards that have these metrics. And then I just think, oh, well, that card is in my box. Let me find it in my monster box. Now we can partially skip this. We can't filter active skills or leader skills, but we can filter awakenings, we can filter the colors, and we can filter the typings. And if you utilize the perfect match checkbox, it will only show cards that fit the exact description given here. So in this case here, from this example, this perfect match will only show cards with 2 skill boosts that are water attribute, and they have God and balance typing. Pretty cool. And this is not turned on by default, which I think is a shame. But if you want to turn it on, you need to go to Others, Options, System, and turning on Custom Filter. I highly recommend everyone does this because it partially takes out the need to go to a third-party site or app to find information for your own monster box. It's not the perfect solution, but it's definitely a step in the right direction. So, in conclusion, updates are always exciting, and as a whole, I feel like this update did provide quite a few meaningful aspects. Like, I like this monster box search feature. Like, it's much more sophisticated. It will make my life much easier. DKali is going to be a wonderfully strong rainbow sub across basically any team that can use her, and more teams can use her due to the balanced typing. So, with that being said, let me know what you think are the biggest winners for this update and which of those you plan to be utilizing more in the future moving forward. Either way, hopefully you all have a fantastic day. I wish you all the best luck in your own pad adventures, and happy puzzling.